در یه جاز 7 تا ده بود که میگفتن این هفته جاز.
دهکده‌ای که ما زندگی میکردیم کروگان بود.
Jasb is a complex of 7 villages nestled in a valley surrounded by mountains. The complex of 7 villages are Kerogan, Waran, Zor, Herazjan, Veskunagan, Veshtakan, and Bijagan.
It's a small village that is situated in the north of all the villages that they together they call Jasb, but our village was called Kerogan and was one of the biggest one.
It was a very beautiful mountainous village.
I was born in Jasb, but I did not grow up there as my parents left while I was a little baby.
Kerogan is in the northeast part of the valley. It is spread out and it's a farming village where the farmers have developed their patches of land for farming in the form of terraces because it's on the side of the mountain, and to do farming they had to develop these terraces, and farmers have different pieces of land next to each other.
I remember living in Tehran, the main road that would take you to Isfahan, Shiraz, the other cities that would go south from Tehran. And after passing Qom, the town of Qom, the city of Qom actually, and before the other town that was Kashan, there was a road that would just take off, to go through the mountains to reach to Jasb.
The streets were basically had a main street that was like a, what you call it, alley, and then there was only two. I remember in my time there were two little shops. That was a family that they had a small shop, and then there was also a butcher.
در این یک قنات آبی داشت که همیشه این آب مرتب بود و خیلی آب گوارای خوب بود که از همه ازش استفاده میکردن.
دهکده کروگان در حدود 400 نفر جمعیت داشت که نصف جمعیت آن بهایی بودند. آن زمان حدود 105 زیرعی داشت.
در حدود 70-80 خانواده در این ده زندگی میکردن که نصف بهایی بودن و نصف مسلمان، و در اون موقع خیلی با هم خوب بودن اینا
و همه بدون هیچ اختلافی با هم زندگی میکردن.
هیچ نوع ناراحتی نداشتن، تا حتی اگر مسلمان ها کاری داشتن که میخواستن با یکی اختلاف انجام بدن، میپرسیدن که محفل روحانی چه موقعی هست که بیایم در اون محفل اختلافمون رو حل کنیم. تا حتی محفل روحانی راجع به چوپان، کت خدا، چیزا تصمیم در محفل روحانی میگیره و همه قبول داشتن.
There was a Baha'i life there. Means that the community was composed of Muslim, Shia Muslim, and Baha'is. The Baha'i Faith and the whole village was kind of, they were family of each other. Means that they are relatives. There was a mosque there. The Baha'i life was very amazing. They had children class, and they have the Baha'i center. We call it Haziratul-Quds. That was the fun times.
و دیگر دهکده وسخونقان بود که یک خانواده بزرگ زندگی می‌کردند و بهایی بودند. 5 دهکده دیگر هیچ بهایی نداشت.
Another village that had a small population of Baha'is was Veskunagan, where the Nouruzi family lived. And that is the village that sometimes my father, when he went to see his friends, he would take me with him, and I got to know that family pretty well. There was an elementary school going up to the 6th grade, and I went through that elementary school. The other villages did not have more than 4th grade schools, and some of the students from other villages for their 5th and 6th grade would come to our school there. So I would say that Kerogan was the most advanced educationally.
I remember that Maman Houri was going to school and I was like 7-8 years younger than him. I was crying to go to school with him.
خونه ما در این کروگان اولین خانه‌ای بود در بالای ده قرار داشت و این آبی که می اومد اول می رسید به خونه ما و اون خیلی از این نظر چیز بود، ولی بقیه ده چون آب می رفت از خونه ها رد می شد، برای آب خوردنشون می اومدن همون بالای خونه ما، ظرفای آبشون رو پر می کردن و برای آب آشامیدنیشون از اون آب استفاده می کردن.
The house that we lived in the village was the first house at the uppermost part of the village where the water stream that came from a very luscious, beautiful spring or qanat, which was further up, the water would come down the stream, passing our house first and then going through other houses throughout the village. Therefore, we received the most fresh, uncontaminated water that you could get. So other families in the village, for their drinking water, for their cooking water and so on, they would need to come and get the water from the front of our house, filling their clay jars and carrying them on their heads and with their hands to take it to their homes. And this was done mostly by women. It was the women and girls who would come and get the water.
I loved that house. It was there is a little water running in front of it, and then we enter to the house. It was beautiful water run. And we were doing a lot of, I remember washing the dishes there and everything. And the people, it was just in the street that the people were passing, and we had two big, stone benches on the side, and everybody, we were sitting and playing there when the people were passing to get water, because our house was the first house in the village. That was a blessing that we had. We were getting the pure water. Everybody was coming to get water from our house.
I don't remember much when I was born and how, when I was, small. I don't remember much. My other siblings, I'm sure, remember some of the stories about me. But anyhow, when we moved to Qasimabad and then Tehran, we would, summertime, we would take a trip to Jasb.
Every summer, we would go there for vacations. And we loved to go there. It was so joyful and a small, tiny place. We could walk around, run around, and climb the trees and pick up fruits, which we couldn't do in the bigger cities.
The road was very interesting. It was kind of scary especially as a child when we were going, because it was, we felt like we were going to fall into the big ditch that was on one side of the, because the one side was a mountain, the other side was the big, deep, valley. So it was kind of scary, but it was at the same time fun. Most of the time we took cars there, but sometimes with the bus. I remember one part that is especially, it was called Kaftar Hole. Kaftar Hole means, like even a bird when it's flying over this canyon would get scared, like kind of, it's so scary. So I remember going from that road. One side of it was the mountain and the other side was the valley, deep valley like canyon. And so the road was so narrow that one car had to stop, so if there was a car coming across, would be able to pass. So that's one of the memories that I have of that, driving there. And then we would pass this valley of, different villages. You would see, the green trees in each area, and you would know that because there was water coming through these villages, where the civilization was, people were living there. And we would pass until the last village, that was Kerogan. When we arrived to Kerogan, of course, you could not drive into the village. You had to park the car way out, before we go in, and we would walk the rest of it. And I remember the people of the village, mostly, and it was interesting, that village, the beginning part was mostly Muslim side, and then as we go further, it was, it would start the homes of the Baha'is. I remember going through, the alleys, all dirt road, all the homes, made of, adobe kind of dirt. And there was this creek that was passing in front of our house. So we would pass a little bridge to get into the house.
از درش که وارد می شدی یه طویله‌ای بود که گاو و الاغ و این چیزا نگهداری می شد. یکی دیگه در پایین‌تر بود که گوسفند و این چیزا نگهداری می شد.
Then when you enter to the house, we have stairs going to the roof of one side, because then there were places for the animals to take care of the animals, and then you enter, there was another kind of pool but without water. It was somewhere that again some of the animals can stay, like a stable.
And I remember just big heavy door, wooden door.
و خونه های اونجا همه با گل بود، آجر و سنگ و تیراهن و تیر چوبی، تیراهن و اینا نبود. و ما عقب اون خونه اتاقا بود که ما در اونجا، اتاق دو طبقه اول و طبقه دوم، اتاق بود که توی اونها و طبقه دوم بالکنی داشت که توی اون خیلی هوای خنک و خوب بود و شبها اونجا میخوابید.
The house had two parts to it. The back part was the living quarters, where there were two large rooms in the lower level, and on top of those there were two large rooms.
The steps was so high. It was not very easy to climb, especially for children. It was not easy to climb.
The house was shared by my older uncle, Abdu'l-Baha Mohajeri, and my father and my mother, my parents, almost half and half. The two main rooms that we used were on top of each other. The lower room was where we all lived, was our living quarters, and the upper room was the room for special occasions, for guests, for Baha'i gatherings, and so on.
It was a two-story building. The upstairs was having beautiful views, and we could hear the birds singing. When the wind was coming, the trees were making beautiful sounds, and that was a huge room that we were doing a lot for the Baha'i activities, the celebration, the feast, and I remember very well that room. And I have so much memory of that room actually. And then downstairs there was a room that mainly winter we were staying in that room, and it was very small but had a like a tanur, like a hole that you, in Iran, they make fire in it, and then they put like a table, short table on it with a blanket, and we all slept around that to warm up. That was a winter room.
And we all, the family, we were in one room. So not that, we all, the siblings, we shared that room with the parents.
When we go to upstairs, there was another yard, and our bathroom was outdoor. Was really outdoor. You didn't. That's the only bathroom for our house. Was we were living the same area that my oldest uncle was living with his wife, and his wife actually was my Maman Houri's aunt, and she was like a mother for Maman Houri because her children, most of them, they were just older than Maman Houri, and that they were living in that house too, and they were living upstairs, and then the downstairs also their son was living with the children. So it was a big family living in that house, and the backyard was a huge backyard. Upstairs there was 2 huge balconies that they were used for again gatherings at a time, another time drying the vegetables and greens and walnuts and almonds and everything.
My father had a little farm that we would go there and pick up almond and walnuts from the trees, and he would break a watermelon and also some cucumber, and those we will have all these fresh vegetables and fruits, and we would have a nice picnic with him. Then in the afternoon, the best part was to ride on a little horsey. It was I'm sorry I said horsey, it was a donkey actually. Then it was like we would go through narrow roads in Jasb, and we would be so scared, but at the same time we loved to be on that. Then we would get home, and my mom had the dinner ready and was wonderful, and there was a nice a stream by our house that we would get to play around that, and also in the morning when we would get up, we would hear the sound of the stream. It was so pleasant. And then my mother had this fresh milk and cream of the milk, which we call sarshir, with the fresh bread for the breakfast, and the smell of the food and the smell of the air and birds singing, it was such a nice memory.
It has a beautiful weather in the summertime, and very pleasant. People tend to want to go and enjoy the weather. It is dry, and the surroundings are very beautiful. In the winter time, it gets cold, and we get quite a bit of snow, and living in the village in the winter time is kind of rough.
Because the village was an agricultural village, the people were farmers, they were cultivating everything they need. All these things were produced by the people themselves, especially potatoes, and then what you call it, the wheat. Wheat was the major one, wheat and the other barley, and the trees were mainly, their income was from those trees, that was almond, walnut, and not pecan, but hazel nuts. And then during summers, they were planting all kind of vegetables.
What they usually grow in these patches of land is wheat and oat, some other grains like beans and chickpeas and so on. And then the other product from the village is almonds and walnuts. There are a lot of almond and walnut trees on the sides of these patches of land, and that would be another product that is produced in the village.
There was also a butcher that we could go and get the meat from the butcher. I remember going to those small shops, And the small shops basically were something that is not even any vegetables. You just buy the things that necessary, like salt, and not even butter, salt, halwa, the sweet, or beans.
Jasb has lots of, orchards of almonds and walnuts, and I heard a lot of stories because as I said, I don't remember it during the time that Maman Houri and Baba Habib lived there, during the time of harvest of the walnuts and almonds, how they would gather all the walnuts and bring it and spread it, put it like a hill in the middle of the room where everybody would sit around. And at that time there was the only thing that they had was a little hammer and or actually two stones, one stone for the bottom and one stone that would crack the walnuts, and they would make take this the inside of the walnut, and then they would take it for sale or take it back to Tehran for the families that they lived in Tehran, and divided between the cousins and uncles and those people.
و برای غذا نون میخواستن تهیه بکنن، نونوایی اونجا نبود. هر کسی نون خودش رو آرد میداد به این آسیاب‌ها، گندم میداد به آسیاب‌ها و آرد درست میکردن و میآوردن خمیر میکردن و نون میپختن. این نون چیزشون بود. برای غذاشون هم گاو و گوسفند داشتن و شیرش از شیر اونها و گوشت اونها استفاده میکردن.
در مورد ازدواج پدر و مادر، پدر میخواست با یک دختر دیگری ازدواج کند. وقتی میرود به سربازی، آن دختر با یک دیگر ازدواج میکند و پدر با مادرمان که از خانواده بهایی بوده و خیلی هم کم سن بود ازدواج میکند. در آن زمان پدر سربازی بوده و وقتی برمیگردد عقد میکند.
Maman Houri was very, very young, and still her older sister was not married. She was, I think, 12 years old, but I heard from Baba Habib that Baba Habib wanted to marry another lady. His mother said, no, I need to find who else you like to get married, and he says, this girl only in the village. And that was Houri. Was very young, she was only 12, and when they went to the father of Houri and the mother asking her hand, they said that she's young and her older sister, that is Narges, is not married, we can't accept it. So for this reason, then they said, okay, we can name her to get married to Habib until her sister gets married. So Maman Houri married very early age, I think age of 14 finally.
داداش عباس به دنیا می آید. مادر 17 ساله بوده و من هم تفاوت سنی با داداش 2 سال و نیم بوده و بین من و منوچهر که برادر کوچکتر است 5 سال تفاوت دارد. و بعد از ما 3 برادر 3 خواهر است. در هر صورت 6 خواهر و برادر با هم دوست خوب هستیم و من افتخار میکنم که چنین خواهر و برادرانی دارم.
Houri had so many wonderful qualities, such as caring, loving, very generous, hospitable, and forgiving, patient, and these are few that I can mention.
Oh, Maman Houri, she was very special. She was this cute little lady, and she just was so lovely. Everyone loved her because she was just like unconditional love for everyone that crossed her path.
این بود که خیلی خیلی ساکت و با محبت به ما و دیگران تا حتی دیگران و همیشه دلش میخواست کمک بکند به دیگران، افرادی که به عنوان مهمان می اومدن به منزل ما.
The quality is one of the qualities was that unconditional love that I admire, and I always remember that and I think she taught us a lot about not seeing differences between people and just love people the way they are, and that is the quality that I see in it, the quality that I saw in her. She loved no matter if she it was her in-laws or her own sibling, because I remember how she talked about her mother-in-law, my Baba Habib's mother, and how she always said that she was a great teacher to her because she was so young when she got married.
My mother was very well known by her hospitality, quality of hospitality.
پذیرایی کامل میکرد و بعد از اینکه میخواستن برن هم یه مقداری غذا و خوراکی و چیزهای دیگه که لازم داشتن، افرادی که احتیاج داشتن به اونا میداد و میبردن برای احتیاجاتشون.
I remember when there were workers in Tehran that they were doing the asphalt in our street front of our house, and my mother was constantly going and bringing them a tray of tea, serving them tea and cookies, and nobody expected, but she was doing that because she knew how they are working hard during the day.
I remember, when we lived in Tehran, people would come, to just do a little bit of work in the house or in the backyard or anything. She would immediately bring them something to drink. She would immediately serve them.
In our house, everybody felt welcome to bring their children to the feast. Many places when we went for feast, they didn't bring their children because they know that the host was not very happy when the children were running around and doing a mess and all these things. But Maman Houri was always having something to put in the hand of the children, say they loved her.
And also she loved serving everyone. And she would be the last one to show up at the table or sofre, and we were always, my father always asking, why are you coming the last? But she wanted to make sure everybody is fine. Even during the fast time, even I was young, and we would my father and everybody would get up to fast. We would smell the meal. She would get up at 2-3 o'clock in the morning to prepare.
مادر زن زحمتکش و ریز هیکلی بود. خانه را خوب اداره میکرد. برای همه چیز من از او تشکر میکنم. روح او شاد.
There were, a couple of rooms downstairs, and actually the one on the left, I remember it was like they have set up the, weaving of carpet, and that's where my, Maman Houri used to sit and, weave carpet, and that was one of the things that she learned as a very young child, and she also taught other girls in the village to how to weave, and she would draw the plan of the carpet and everything. She was a very smart girl, but even though she didn't get much of education, but she was she was good at what she was doing, and she was a great manager. So we all learned that, especially at the end of her life, how she would, with the things that she would say, she would manage us. As Anayat always says, she was an artist, from the very beginning, just learning how to do weaving a carpet, and you all know how difficult that Persian carpet weaving is. we just look at it and admire it, but we don't know how much of the work in each one of those threads, so how much of work has put into that.
She was always wearing the best quality of clothing. She was always kind of a very dignified dressing.
And one of the stories about her patience and forgiveness was when she had company, she would prepare all these goodies for the company to come, and we always had company coming on weekends. And she would get everything ready, and I knew where she puts all these things. And as a child, I would love to go and get some of it. And I was thinking that probably she hasn't noticed because she wouldn't mention anything. But later on, I realized that she was noticing, and just out of her love and out of her forgiveness, or she wouldn't mention anything to me. And that was a quality that I think I admire the most about her.
Well, some of the funny memories, one of them was actually in the, when we lived in Tehran. We had this house, it was 3-story and it had a basement. And I remember in the summertime when, we would get together, like myself and Mahnaz, and I have an uncle, Dai Hassan, that was kind of almost the same age as us. And we would just play, especially in the basement. We would play what they call it these days, house, like home, or what they call it, with children, like one mom and dad, and anyhow. So we would play, different things. And I remember my uncle would always put like one of these chador. Chador is the cover that, ladies wear on him, and he would walk around the house. And whenever he opened the refrigerator door, Maman Houri would say, "Nahi, it's you again? You're opening the refrigerator door again?" Because she thought it was me that doing it, but it was actually Hassan that was doing it, but acting like, pretending that he's us.
There are several qualities that I remember and I can recount, and those are selflessness, contentment, patience. They stood out in my mind. And an example, a case at hand that I would share with you is her understanding and patience and happiness, contentment, when she attended Baha'i gatherings in the United States, where she did not understand much of the language, but she would sit in the meeting smiling, very happy, never expecting translations be done for her, and not complaining that, oh, I'm not going to go to such and such meeting because it is difficult for me, I don't understand, it's boring. And it was through that many of the friends, Western believers, became very attracted to her.
She loved music, and she memorized these different songs and the music, especially at her, later on in her life, because she, she was home all the time. She would listen to all these Persian music, and she knew all the, the singers, and also said, reading, even though she had a very, like a couple of years of schooling, but she loved to read. So she read and read all these books, and she, and she would, the interesting thing was that she had these little notebooks, and she, if she found something interesting in the books, a story or something, she would kind of write them, so it would take her hours and hours of writing something, and in her little notebook. And we do have a couple of her notebooks that, she writes about different stories.
Even up to last days of her age, she was always having something to give you when you go to her room, or something. When I remember when I was living, each time I leave for Africa, she was giving me $20. It says, eat something in the airport.
Of course, her love for the faith was immense, and just listening to her pray and meditate and until the end of her life was I think even like a couple of nights before she passed away, or just a night, as I remember hearing it, she was saying prayers and she was communing with God. And the one thing that I remember very well is whenever we went to the doctor, because she was kind of saying, why am I still on this earth? And she would tell her doctor, oh God, means, tell, God, I don't know why God is not taking me. So, she was very special.
That are wonderful memories I have from her. Of course, there are many, many, many more, but it will take a long time to share all the wonderful memories with her, as she was such a sweet lady.
پدر من اسمش بود حبیب الله مهاجری.
Our father, Baba Habib, which unfortunately I was very young when he passed away, had wonderful qualities. He was a very wise man, he was a just man, and very kind and loving, and everybody around loved him.
مردی بود بلند قد و قوی.
Life in Jasb, summer was farming and or preparing the farming for next year, but also the winter, most of the people were going for hunting deer or other eatable animals around the mountains. Baba Habib was a very, very good hunter. And I remember when he was bringing this big, huge deer, and they had to clean it, and then they were making small pieces of meat and with cut like a meat stew, and with the bones they were doing something else. They were trying to dry them up to conserve because they were not having refrigerator those days. So they were cooking it with a lot of salt and dry up, and they were keeping it for many months. That was the meat for the winter.
He was very wise. He was this tall, very strong-looking man, and I heard the stories that when he was younger, he did, with his strength, a lot of people would ask him to do different things that needed that strength.
I remember they were conserving a lot of fruits for the Shab Yalda, that is the longest night in the year, that the culture of Iran is to celebrate and to eat fruit that is fresh. These days it's so easy, you go to the market and you buy and you cut your watermelon. Or those days I remember we had a room, that room was very cold, and they were hanging the fruits, like apples hanging, grapes were hanging, pear was hanging, any fruits that they had in the summer, they were hanging it to have it for the winter. And that was another memory, that how Baba Habib was hard worker to make this things ready for all of us.
I remember when we moved to Qasimabad, another village close to Tehran, and he would take me to school with his bicycle because the road to the school was long. It was, for me that I was like 7 years old, it was difficult to walk all the way. So he would put me on the back, in front of him on the bike, and just in the on the what they call it, that bar in the front. And I remember him riding his bike so close to the to the little water, what they call it, water canal or something that was on the side of the road where and he would go so close that it would scare me to death every time I look down. And that's maybe one of the reason, or I from the very childhood I was scared of the height, and so my knees started shaking when I was in the high places.
با اینکه هیکلی درشت و قوی داشت، برای همه چیز با هیچ کس مخالفتی نداشت.
At some points he was a chief of a village, and I remember people would come and consult with him. He always brought unity and love to everyone, and with his wisdom.
که همه ده قبولش داشتن و کارهای خیر زیاد انجام میداد و هر موقع افراد ناراحتی داشتن ایشون حل میکرد براشون. و در جاس چون بهایی بود و کارهای خدمات امری زیاد میکرد و در تمام از دوران جوانی تا دوران پیری که در جاس بود، در کروگان بود، عضو محفل روحانی جاس.
He was very just with, so a lot of people would come to him to figure out things.
رابطه ما با تمام مردم آن دهکده همیشه خوب و سالم بود. هیچ وقت اختلافی نداشتیم. اگر کسی غریبی به دهکده می آمد، اختلافی می انداخت، پدر اصلاح می کرد. تمام 7 دهکده او رو می شناختند.
I can't forget that walking with my father to one of these feasts, those days there was no light in the street, so they were carrying this lantern, and because he was big and I was probably 4 years old, 5 years old, and he was holding my hand. For me it was very interesting because wherever we were passing, because of that lantern, his legs on the wall of the streets, on the houses, was a huge, like a giant, and I was a little, like a little ant or little puppy running behind him. But that was another memory that I had. And at the feast, he was the chairperson of the assembly, so he always had to be at the feast, and he was coordinating.
و چون مرد قوی بود، مهمانانی که از خارج از کروگان به جاس می اومدن همیشه در منزل ما بودن، محافل سیار، جوانها و مبلغین و مبلغینی که به جاس می آمدن. یادم هست که مثلا جناب ایادی امرالله ابوالقاسم فیضی آمده بود جاس برای در حوالی کاشان و بعد آمد جاس و همیشه موقعی که میخواست به جاهای دیگه و دهات دیگه برد، یک نفر با خودش میبرد که اون همیشه پدر ما بود، چون مردی بود قوی و خیلی نیرومند و همیشه با اینا مسافرت میکرد در مسافرت‌های تشویقی و تبلیغی. یکی جناب ایاری امرالله بود یه موقعی، بعد بیشتر جناب محمد علی فیضی که برادر جناب ایادی بودن.
پدر تمام روزهای خود را می گرفت و در مدتی که عضویت محفل روحانی را داشت جدی بود.
Maman Houri was waking up to make the food ready, and he was starting chanting the long prayers for fast, and that memory stays with me always, and I make sure that during the fast I say that prayer chanting in his memory. That was a beautiful time we had, and that was the reason even before being the age of having the age of 15, all the children, we love to wake up and share the time with father, mother, and the brothers.
One of the things that stands out in my mind is that when I was 10 or 11 years old, he took me on a trip, maybe a 2-week trip, where we stopped at different villages where he had wonderful friends, and we stayed at these friends' homes. They would take wonderful care of us, delicious food, the best fruit that they had, they would offer, and of course at that age, I enjoyed that very much.
He was much respected throughout the village, and also between his extended family. All the nieces and nephews just loved him dearly.
Wherever we went, that they had a girl a few years younger than me, they would kind of designate as if that girl is going to be my wife, or talk about the prospect of that girl being my wife. I remember at least 3 that I'm not going to mention the names.
Baba Habib would be the storyteller, because he was a very good storyteller. So you can tell from some of the children where they got this storytelling talent, because he was a great story, and he would tell stories of the old Persian tales from Shahnameh, one of the, So, and people were sitting around for hours on hours doing these nuts, and then listening to him telling stories.
He was a wonderful storyteller, and every night we would look forward to hear his stories, and he would tell us a story that would continue over nights. And every night we were impatiently waiting for him to tell us the story. And he would say, okay, that's enough for tonight, and we will continue tomorrow. And this, for me, was a joy of my life.
He taught me when I was 7 years to play backgammon, because he loved to play backgammon. And I remember when we would play, he would always, he would roll these dice, and he would go sheshobesh, means 6 and 5. And sheshobesh is, it's a good hand to have, especially at the beginning of the game when you're just starting. It can helps you to get out of where you are and move on to the goal of your game.
With my father, of course, there were some games that we played together. For instance, we played backgammon, and we enjoyed playing it. Sometimes I would beat him, but he would be still happy that his younger son had taken care of him.
I had to go to first grade in Qasimabad, and still my mom and Mahnaz and Nahid, they had to be in Jasb, so he took me early to be starting of the school. And when I went to school, because the school was a mixed school, in Iran normally they are not mixed school, it's girls separate and boys separate, but this was a village school, and it was small. So at the end, before we leave for the weekend, the school principal came and talked about everybody should, when come back on the end of the weekend, they should cut their hair. And so I went home and I started saying to my father, I had a long hair and beautiful curly kind of golden hair, and I insisted that my hair should be cut. And my father says, no, who said that you should cut? No, the teacher said, the principal said, when we go to school on Sunday and Saturday, because the school was Saturday, the first day of school, you should have short hair. Your hair should be short. So anyhow, I cried. I said, I don't go to school until my hair is cut. So I had 2 big braids. They cut this and make it short. When I went to school, my teacher at the class says, what happened to your hair? Why you cut it? And I said, this was the thing that they said. Oh my God, they find out that was told for the boys. The boys should have short hairs, means that's kind of shaved or clean, and not for the girls. And I thought it's for the girls. So that was the story of when I came back and I told Baba Habib said, I know that they didn't tell to cut your hair, but you insisted, and that was the way I was. If anything my teacher said, I had to do. If my supervisor said, I had to do. There was no question.
He loved my long hair, straight long hair, and I dared to cut them any time. So I never cut my hair, when I was growing up, except, a little bit of, like trimming sometimes, but it was, he loved it very much.
Also, I can't forget his last going for shopping for our Nowruz. That is a little, a memory that I can't forget. Baba Habib, as I said, he was a very good a person to visit and connect with the people. And that weekend in Iran, he made sure that Dai Abbas, he had a car to take him to see some of the friends. And then on a Saturday, that was the beginning of the week, after I came back from school, he said, okay, Mahvash, I did help the other to buy their shoes and for the Nowruz. Let's us to go and do shoppings for your shoes, so my mind will be clear that I did every preparation for your Nowruz party. And that was the Nowruz, means that the same night, next morning, he didn't wake up. So when I think about that, it's always a stand up, that how he was caring about make sure our life are set correctly and we have everything needed.
Too bad that he passed away very, when we were very young. He was a very special person.
پدر قلبی صاف و ساده داشت.
When I was younger, and my father and mother would go and visit families always, and they would take me with them. And a couple of days before he passed away, we were going to visit some of the relatives, and we ran to some of my cousins, and they asked, Amu, you're taking your little child with you, where are you going? And he explained to them, and then he said, she's gonna be my asay piri, means my old age cane, which means she will be there for us, for him and my mother, to be taking care of them when they get older. And unfortunately, he passed away 2 days after, but I am happy. I could do that for my mother, and I hope that my father is pleased with that. And these are little memories. There are many others. I have wonderful memories of my father and miss him very much.
پدر و مادر ما در مدتی که با هم زندگی می‌کردند با دوستی و محبت بودند و من هیچ وقت خشونتی در بین این دو نفر ندیدم و همیشه در تربیت بچه‌ها جدی بودند. در خانواده ما هیچ وقت حرف بد زده نمیشد. تربیت بهایی بود. مادر و پدر در مورد تشکیلات بهایی با هم توافق داشتند. هیچ گونه مخالفتی با هم نداشتند.
درباره غذایی که در جاسب ما می‌خوردیم، این غذا معمولاً تمام ده، چون ما دکانی به این عنوان نبود که برن غذا بگیرن بخورن، غذا همیشه خودشون تهیه می‌کردن از محصولات.
در مورد غذا سه وعده مرتب بود.
The meals at the village were very simple. Breakfast would be bread and cheese. Lunch would be something like ardeshira, mast with bread. And then when it came to dinner, it was usually abgusht.
تهیه آن با مادر بود که مهارتی خوب داشت.
We didn't eat very elaborate, so meals were simple. But I remember Maman Houri usually, especially when we were younger, much smaller, she would be the one. But then as we grew up, we would help in the kitchen.
When we lived in the village, the cooking was primarily done by my mother. Occasionally, I would help with some of the dishes. Perhaps being the youngest boy, I was a bit of more help to her at that time, because my sisters at that time were much younger, because Mahvash is about 7 years younger than me, and then Nahid 10, and Mahnaz about 13 years younger than me. And Mahnaz and Nahid did not live much in the village. Mahvash, as a matter of fact, started her elementary school when my family had moved to a village near Tehran, and they were living there, the village Qasimabad.
Talking about the food at our house, there was always wonderful food around. My mom was a great cook, and she made everything with love. And always the smell of the food around the house was so pleasant.
لبنیات شامل بود از ماست و پنیر و سرشیر. صبح به صبح مادر ما شیری که از گاو و گوسفندان می اومد توی یک ظرفی میذاشت توی اتاق، و شب تا صبح این شیر روش بسته میشد لایه، و با نون تافتون اونو میگرفتن از روش و توی ظرف میذاشتن. این صبح برای صبحانه و مقداری شیره انگور هم بهش اضافه میکردن و این صبحانه ما.
This is an interesting question. As I said already, that if we want to talk about the life in Jasb, I was only 5 years old, and I have memory up to 5 years old or 6 when we left Jasb. So yes, in Jasb, the lunch was the main, and my mother used to cook the food and take it to the farm for my father and the people that they work.
غذای بیشتر غذاهای سوپ آبگوشت، لبنیات و یه نوع چیز بود که کنجد خورد شده. دکانی بود به نام دکان حلوایی، کنجد خورد شده و شیره انگور رو میگرفت و اون رو میگرفتیم از اون محل و مخلوط میکردیم، اردشیره درست میکردیم.
I loved her spaghettis. Her fesenjoon was great, and abgusht that she would make, and my father would mash the potato and meat and everything together.
و ظهرها و شبها آبگوشت بود. و در
Abgusht was the soup that was made with beans and chickpeas and meat, and then we would have the soup separate with some bread in it, as well as the solids that we would mash them together and serve that. Abgusht was one of the main meals we had on a regular basis.
Actually, there were a couple of things that I remember very well. One was kalejush or kaljush in Jaspi they call it, or the other call it telite kash. And this was, at that time we didn't have blender or anything, so there was this pot made of, clay, and in the pot there were like rocks kind of sticking out. So you had to, the cash were dry, like the dry balls, and you had to kind of, rub these these balls to these rocks in this bowl. And I remember I was one of the one that always did that, and I remember my, the palm of my hand afterward was like kind of, like what they call it, they get wrinkled and get old. It was was that I remember very well. Kalijush or kaljush or is a product of cash. Cash is from yogurt, and I think some of you might remember that at our reunion here in 2019, the family of Mohajeri, we had Telite cash good. So we are not kind of modifying it with mix of Shirazi and Jasb, and it's a little bit different, but that's the basis of it is the same.
در مورد پختن غذا تابستان ها هیزم تهیه میشد در اجاق های گلی درست میشد. نان گندم خودشان درست میکردن. ماهی یک مرتبه نان میپختن.
One of the very memorable for me is when they were harvesting the potatoes. The potato farm was huge and they had very delicious potatoes. So the whole family, we were going for that harvesting, and they were having a big pot that they make a big fire from the morning, and the first group of the harvest means the first potatoes that they were out. I remember my mother was cleaning them quickly. There was always running water from the area in that area of the farming. So she was putting a big pot of potato, and that was our lunch.
و در مورد عید نوروز و عیدهای دیگر پلو و ماهی بود که سالی یک یا دو مرتبه دو وعده ماهی دودی خورده میشد.
One of the very special meals that we had was from for Nowruz celebration, where the meal consisted of sabzi polo, which was rice and greens, and then also fish. And the fish was smoked salmon that was brought from the city because smoked salmon could be kept for a long time, and that was one of the most delicious meals that would be prepared and we would share for Nowruz celebrations, and of course many sweets also would be served for Nowruz celebrations.
Her ashereshte was very good, and she would make a lot of it, and she would always share with other people, taking some to the neighbors or the cousins that lived close by or something.
In Jasb, they make their own butter, all the produce from their sheep, goats, cows. They had their delicious butter that with that potato, now we call it mashed potato. Over there, over those days where the potato was cooked so beautifully that was cut through, and it was so delicious. That was one of the together with the workers, with the family we were doing. In Tehran, we were having, of course, lunch was the main food, and a lot of times I was helping mainly for chopping and cleaning the greens for horma sabzi, because everybody was saying that my hands was so fine that was not getting any color to it, and also peeling of the the eggplants. The eggplants peeling was my job, and cleaning and chopping of the lot of vegetables and helping for greens, means not vegetables, greens for the horma sabzi, helping Maman Houri with the big pot of rice to turn when she was boiling, because I was stronger than her, to help her with those things. We were doing a lot of, everything was manually, so we were doing all the dishwashing, was all the work that we were doing, the girls were doing at home.
Another thing that I remember, it was the time that we would make tomato sauce or juice of abgure, as we call it. It's juice of sour grape. And those were stories to tell, and the process, it was amazing. So Abora, we had to get all these sour grapes and smash them and then kind of squeeze them, and so it was, so we would get all these like boxes of sour grape to have the sour grape juice, because it was great for salad dressing. It was so tasty, it was so sour, and the other things too. So those were processes that we did, when we were younger. Of course, I remember these things in Tehran mostly, not in in Jasb or in Qasimabad, mostly in Tehran.
Those days, normally families made preparation for certain food for the whole year, like preparing tomato paste or lemon juice or grape juice for the whole year. And my mother would buy everything, and we would all go to the basement, the three girls and my mother, and work on it, and would take days. And after we had the thing forever, and that time was the time of talking and laughing and joking and telling stories, and those are the wonderful memories I have from those days.
And another thing that I remember very well, it was my cutlet. That's why I make good cutlet, because I did it from very young age, cutlet, making it, and it, those are some of the things I remember with Maman Houri, helping her, and because she had a lot on her hands. She was, this little lady, she had to take care of everything. Cutlet is the meal that is a combination of meat and potato and some egg to kind of hold it together, and then you just make like a patties. It has onion, of course, shredded onion and spices, and you just make it to a patty and fry it.
We would sit around the sofre, which is a tablecloth that we would spread on the ground, and everybody would sit on it, and those memories are so live in my life, because we all had a good time together. And at the end, my father would say, who is going to clean the sofre? And we were all sitting and laughing and trying to have a good time. And he would say, do you want me to call the neighbor to come and clean it? And that was something we had fun with. And I think I grew up in a very happy and joyful household, as both my parents were very caring and loving.
And why is it important for you to continue to make those foods now for your children and your grandchildren?
My children and grandchildren started liking it because we always ate it, and they love it, and that's why I make it all the time. That's one of the, especially cutlet is one of the my grandkids' favorite.
I hope that everybody gets those chances in their life to be together and prepare something, because there is a joy in that.
We always had guests, we always had people coming over. And Maman Houri was such a hospitable, person. And of course, Baba Habib, as you might know, he was very loving and very just. So a lot of people would come to him as very wise. He would come for getting, get advice, and especially his nieces, nephews, they loved him and respect him very much. So, and also Maman Houri's family, like my uncles, like Baba Habib was like their father, because they lost their father very young, very, very young. So they all look up to my father as like a fatherly, figure. And so we always, our house was full of people, and Maman Houri would serve everyone. And I remember one time, one of the cousins, we had, these railings on the balcony, and the railings were narrow. And one of the cousins pushed his head through one of the railings, and his head was, out, and his body was inside. And now he was trying to, we were all children, we were playing, and that's what he did. And he was trying to get himself out, but he couldn't, because his ears got stuck with with a railing, and it was really funny. So the adult had to bring some soap and kind of put soap on his ear so the head could come out of the railing.
Khalil Nahid was 3 years younger than me, and then Mahnaz was born 2 years after her. So they were very small, and I was the oldest girl, and I wanted to go to anywhere to play. She wants me to carry her, and I was saying, no, I don't want to carry you. I love to have you, but I can't carry you. And she was kind of always lazy to walk with us. She wants me to put her on my back and walk.
Another cousin of mine, we grew up together, Mahshid. We were both very naughty, and we would go to school, and what we would do on the way, like we would holding hands and say, okay, one of us close the eyes and the other one lead the other one. And I would try to find the little holes and lead her to the hole. And we would both die from laughter because this was something funny at that time as a kid.
So these are the kind of memories. There's a lot beautiful memories also we have, but time will not allow here.
تک کلامی که داشتن و توصیه‌ای که می‌کردن پدر یا مادر و اینا، پدر مخصوصاً، از اتحاد و اتفاق بین فرزندا، برادر و خواهرها. مثلی که می‌زدن میگفتن که یک پادشاهی 12 تا بچه داشت و اینها رو صدا کرد و گفتش که هر کدوم یه دونه از چوب بهشون داد، گفت اینا رو بگید تو گرفتن و خب اینا رو بشکنید. اینا رو همشون شکستن و گفتن اشکال نداره. 2 تا داد، 2 تا هم تا اندازه شکستن اینا، ولی 3 تا 4 تا که داد، 4 5 تا که داد، هیچ کدوم نتونستن. گفت ببینید این اتحاد است که اگر شما اتحاد داشته باشید هیچ کس نمیتونه بهتون غلبه کنه.
One more thing that I remember my father saying, as far as the unity and the oneness of the family and being supportive to each other, was he always gave example of we are each one of us like our fingers of a hand, and if one finger cannot by itself do much, but with the help of others and with the support of others, we can accomplish much more. So this was something that I remember very well.
My father, he would always tell us to be united, and he would always give us the example of how a family could be united, and he would say you should be like fingers of the hand, that we have to be together, and nobody can break all the fingers when they are together, and if there is one finger alone it can break easily. Then that means keep the unity of the family.
رابطه ما با تمام مردم آن دهکده همیشه خوب و سالم بود. هیچ وقت اختلافی نداشتیم.
Our mother was such a great reinforcement for that idea of having, that love and unity between the children and the siblings.
My mother oftentimes when we would be departing would say, خدا پشت پناهت باشه, which means God may be your support and refuge. That's the statement that I remember.
Baba Habib was kind of, when she was getting a little upset, he said, La ilaha illallah, means that, oh God, the great one. There is no God than God. So this was one of the things he was saying.
They always encouraged us to be of service in the community, and that was their say for us, their statement, to be out there and serve the community and help others in any aspect of their life.
always he says, I don't want to live in a life that I'm handicapped and I will be a burden to anybody, because he used to go and visit the relatives that they were in bedridden, and this was his always the wish, that he will not stay in bed, and that was the way that God blessed him with his departure from this world.
Talking about the statements my mother and father would make, for my mother, she was very appreciative of when people did something for her. She would always say, دستت درد نکنه مادر، خسته نباشیم، قربون دستت برم، انشالله که همیشه خوب و خوش و سلامت باشی. Which literally translating it would be, may your hand does not hurt, may you will not be tired, thank you very much for everything you do for me, and may I be sacrificed for your hands, and also I pray that you will be healthy and be happy. This was her say of appreciation for things people did for her.
Maman Houri used to say, خوب و خوش و سلامت. Whenever we were talking with her, خوب و خوش و سلامت. This means that be good, be happy, and be healthy. That was her saying, and that was for everybody. She was not saying only for us, to everybody she was saying. One of the things that Maman Houri says, اگر کاشتن سبز نشد, means that you can't really regret for the things that there was if in it, or possibilities. اگر بود, اگر نبود, if was possible or if was not possible.
We had a tablecloth, that sofre that we would put on the ground, and around it there was a writing that I loved, and that was شکر نعمت نعمتت افزون کند، کفر نعمت از کفت بیرون کند. That means appreciating the blessings of God will increase His blessings, and if you complain, that blessing will go away and will decrease. And that was a lesson for me and in my life, to be appreciative for what I have, and we are always encouraged to be appreciative.
When Mullah Hussein passed through Jasb in Kerogan, basically, he passed. He stayed in one family's house, and then he spread the message with this person that was the imam of the mosque. And so they, of course, this person, when he announced at the mosque that the promised one has come, of course, they killed him. And the village, as I said, was a village that everybody was kind of family with each other. At that point, there was a man that accepted the faith, Mirza Ghulam Reza, that his wife was the sister of Baba Habib's father. So through that man, Baba Habib's father became Baha'i.
در مورد اجدادی پدر محمد تقی بود، مردی شجاع و قوی.
و یکی خاطره‌ای که تعریف میکرد همیشه راجع به تصدیق امر وارد شدن به امر دیانت بهایی و شناختن حضرت بهاءالله بود، که تعریف میکرد پدرش محمد تقی یک سفری با قاطرش میاد تهران و قاطرش از این نعل میخواسته، یعنی که کفش قاطر اولاغ و اینا نعل میخواسته، میبره در جلو مسجد شای نعل بندی بوده اونجا که قاطرش رو نعل بکنه، میره اونجا و به اون میداد، اون مشغول کارش میشه. کار ضمناً میپرسد از اون نعل بند که خب خبر تازه چیه در تهران؟ میگه که یکی در شیراز ادعای قائمیت کرده و بعد هم بردن نگهش هم بردن تبریز و شهیدش کردن. بعد از اون شخص دیگری در بغداد ادعای مظهر ظهور کرده و اون این خبرهای تازه است. میگه خب در این باره چه من نمیدونستم چطور میشه تحقیق کرد. گفت شما در کجا هستی؟ میگه جاسب. میگه خیلی خوب در جاسب فرد خیلی مطلعی هست به نام آمیرزا غلام رضا. میگه خب آمیرزا غلام رضا شوهر خواهر منه. میگه خب اون دیگه بهترینه، تو برو اونجا هر چی میخوای از اون بخوا. میاد جاسب و آمیرزا غلام رضا و صحبت میکنه و اونم قانع میشد و بهایی میشد از اونجا.
When my grandfather from my father's side, Muhammad Taqi, accepted the faith, he was the youngest of 3 brothers, and the 2 brothers were somewhat Orthodox Muslims. They were very upset with him for having left Islam and having become a Baha'i, and they, as well as many of the other Muslim population in the village, caused him quite a bit of persecution, as well as his older sons like Saifullah, Zabihullah, and Ziaullah. And there is a story that once they hung him with his feet from a tree, and they were beating him so that he would leave his belief, his faith. So persecution of Baha'is, of course, was there at that time to a great extent as well.
هر موقع از دهکده های پایین برای مزاحمت بهایی ها می آمدند، چون تفنگ داشته میرفته، کسی جرأت این که مزاحمت فراهم کند نداشته و خواهرش زن میرزا غلام رضا جاسبی بوده. میرزا غلام رضا جاسبی کسی بود که هر کس میرفته با او صحبت دینی بکند باید بهایی میشده یا اینکه از پهلوی او فرار میکرد.
I know that Baba Habib's mother is coming from a Muslim family and then accepted the faith because all her family, they are originally from Hamadan, and all her family we met sometimes in Tehran when we were growing. Baba Habib was taking us because he wants to keep the connection. They were very, very in the hijab and very Muslim. The grandfather of Maman Houri was accepted the faith very early age. I think Maman Houri goes to one more generation to the Baha'i Faith than Baba Habib. Of course, Maman Houri's mother, most of these people, the men first accepted the faith, except, of course, the women, they were involved, and we have a lot of history of the Baha'is of Jasb, that they are women, that they were real actors in it.
Among them was my grandfather from Maman Houri's side, Maman Houri's father, and my grandfather from, actually it was Maman Houri's grandfather and my grandfather.
My Amu Ziaullah, who was the 3rd brother, my father was the 4th brother, ended up with his hip broken, that he lived with it for the rest of his life, because over there was no surgery, no way of taking care of that kind of thing, and he always walked with a cane. He was a very, very beautiful soul.
It was unfortunate for them to go through so much hardship, so much persecution, and I remember they torture them so much sometimes. And I had an uncle, Baha'u'llah, that we loved him very much. He was a very simple man, and he was beaten so much that his hip has broke at a very young age, so he was limping throughout his life. And but the way the love of the faith was grown in their heart, that they were really true believers.
The story I would like to share about my parents before they got married, one is what my mother would always tell me, that in village of Jasb, there was no schooling, and the Baha'is decided to have a school that their children can get some education. Then therefore my uncle brought a couple from Qom, a young couple, to Jasb, and they started a school, and the lady would teach the girls and the husband would teach the boys, and this way they learned how to read and write. And my mother was always so appreciative of what this couple did in the village, because if she hasn't gone through those schooling, she would not be able to read. And if, as most of us remember, through the end of her life, my mother, she never left a book down, and she would always be reading. And for my father also, he read lots of story books and lots of Baha'i books, and they were able to memorize prayers, and all because of the schooling they got through this couple, which my mother was always praying for them, that they gave her this opportunity that she could read and write. And I always remember that she would mention that, and that was one of the highlights of her life.
محمد تقی سه برادر دیگر داشته بودند که فقط محمد تقی بهایی می شود و دو برادر دیگر یاغی بودند. محمد تقی و خواهرش روحانی ها هستند که در حدود 500 نفر هستند شدند و محمد تقی مهاجری ها هستند که در حدود 400 نفر هستند. دو برادر دیگر هیچ از آنها باقی نمانده.
Most of the Baha'is that came from that area was from Kerogan, from that, those two families that, they became believers, and, their children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren started going, pioneering all over the world, and, how they suffered, but, the most important thing is how they installed the love of the faith into their children and their families. And my hope, and I'm sure their hope, is this continue for generations to come.
توصیه‌ای که برای بچه‌های خودم و دیگران، دوستان و آشنا دارم، این است که تحصیلاتشون رو کامل بکنن. تحصیل بکنن و تحصیلات خیلی کاملی که به یه درجه بالاتری برسن، ضمناً خدمت به جمال مبارک، خدمت به امرالله، اوامر حضرت بهاءالله را اطاعت بکنن و خدمت به اون و تبلیغ در امرالله و هر نوع خدمتی که میتونن بکنن از اون نظر در اون راه قدم بردارن.
One of the most important is for them to for their faith. Their faith was, what they kept them going. They had a hard. Their life was not easy, of course, but what kept them going was their faith and reliance on God, and that's something I think they would want their future generation to also have that strength, that hold to their faith, for the love of God and service to the humanity. So those are the things I think they would be joy. It would be a joy to their soul when they see their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, their future generation are following up and keeping, that faith that was built many, many years ago in the heart of their great-grandfathers and ancestors.
The teaching of the Baha'i Faith really touched them, means that they were acting on them. They were not simply saying a prayer and living their life as normal it used to be. They were examples.
I would say it would be their deep love for the faith, unpretentious. They did not pretend it, but they lived it, and that is something that I would tell the generations to come.
In the back old days when there was none of these advanced things that we do have now, they had to go, if they were going anywhere, it was a donkey that they would ride, to go from one place to another. It would take them long time, hours and hours and days of travel to go from one place to another. Or the first time they wanted to go visit the house of the Bab in Shiraz, it took them a long time, but they taking the family and just being there because of the love that they had, even though it was not an easy task as far as material means, but they did it because of the love that they had, the connection that they felt, that bind their hearts together.
دوران بسیار خوبی بود. من از پدر و مادرم متشکرم. روح هر دوشان شاد باشه و حق را به ما شناسان.
Keep unity in the family was one of the things that they really learned from them. Be loving to each other and be loving to everybody else. Be considerate of the rest of the people. Don't think only about yourself.
If I would say something to the next generation of Habib and Houri, is that they always wanted us to be united. No matter what, under any circumstances, be united and stand by each other and respect and love each other. And that is one of the lessons they taught us, and I could see that during their marriage life.
They also were very hospitable in terms of receiving guests, receiving family, and being very caring, very loving and hospitable to their members, to their friends and relatives.
Baba Habib is the sense of his justice, and he's also keeping the family together. He was always connecting the family together. He was also big help to most of the people that he knew. He was putting his own interests aside to help the others. And I know that Maman Houri always says to Arash that you remind me of Baba Habib. Maman Houri was, for me, was her smile, was always welcoming. Her smile was welcoming to anybody. I can remember taking her one day to dealers for shopping, and she didn't understand any language, but she was walking and her smile wasn't there. And a lady comes and says, is she your mother? And I said, yes. She says, she has a beautiful smile and she makes me happy. Can I hug her? And I learned that we can always share a smile with somebody and give hope to the people to be feeling of being loved.
There was so much respect and love and hope. We keep that going in their memories. And the other thing that they really wanted us to be true servants. They have tried hard as they were a great example for all of us. To serving everyone around them. These are a couple of things that I would pass to the next generation of Houri and Habib.
Can you share a story about the history?
Okay, that's actually not a funny story.
They would kind of designate as if that girl is going to be my wife or talk about the prospect of that girl being my wife. I remember at least 3 that I'm not going to mention the names.
Very good story.
Just start. Go. That's fine. No, just start telling.